The Somme was really the first test of Kitchener's volunteer soldiers. These were the guys who had enlisted in 1914, 1915. They weren't professionals, they were trained, very basically trained, very basically equipped, but they were asked on the Somme in 1916 to take on a professional, well-trained, well-defended, well-armed and equipped German army. Now, on the 1st of July 1916, the attack began. They had been the bombardment again, classic sort of tactical way of instigating an attack was to bombard the devil out of the Germans, send over the top with the infantry then to follow all along. Nothing had changed, by the way, in terms of real tactics since the Boer War. It was obvious what was going to happen. The bombardment failed to knock out the German wire. It also failed to knock out their defences in their dugouts. Consequently, when the infantry signals went in on the 1st of July, the whistles blew along the Somme front at 6 o'clock on the 1st of July. When the infantry went over the top, the Germans were literally waiting for them. They'd come up out of their dugouts and decimated the waves of infantry. And they were waves. They weren't told to run. They were told that by the 1st of July, by 6 a.m, British generals told them there won't be a rat left in those dugouts by the time we finish with this bombardment. But the dugouts were well deepened, well defended. So when the infantry attack went in, it was a complete disaster. Now, in terms of the Dublin Fusiliers, they were in the line in their respective divisions. The 2nd Battalion were in the 4th Division, 1st Battalion were in the 29th Division, and right beside the 29th Division was the famous 36th Ulster Division, which was just one of these Kitchener divisions, a very political division. The Ulster Division, if you go up to the Shankill Road today, go up to Northern Ireland, you'll see murals on the wall depicting the bravery of the Ulster Division, and indeed they were. There's no doubt about it. 5,500 of that infantry division were wiped out within a few hours and never came back. So consequently, much like the Australians and New Zealand have used Gallipoli as their historic touchstone, so too do the Unionist and Loyalist people of Northern Ireland use the 1st of July and the image of the Ulster Division going over the top as their touchstone of history. They weren't all Ulster, good loyal Ulstermen who went over the top. I've recently discovered that 2 men from Killeen Road in Rathmines fought with the Ulster Division at the Battle of the Somme. So history again tends to confuse itself sometimes. But beside the Ulster Division was the 29th Division, which contained the 1st Dublins, and beside them again up the sector was the 4th Battalion, or the 2nd Battalion in the 4th Division. Between the 2 battalions, they didn't suffer as bad as the initial waves, mainly because they were in the 2nd wave, and by that time the attack had been called off. Yet even still, between them, they suffered about 600 casualties. And again, we can list off some of them who they were: fellas from Bride Street, fellas from Skerries, fellas from Howth. Very much an Irish tragedy, the Somme was, as distinct from a purely British tragedy. The Somme, if we can just mention one thing about it, it began in July 1916, it ended in November. And one of the last battalions to go into battle on the 13th of November was the 10th Royal Dublin Fusiliers, who was the last battalion of the Dublin Fusiliers to be recruited in Dublin. The only action those guys had seen prior to November 1916 was the Easter Rising. They were one of the battalions of the Dublin Fusiliers who actually took on the Irish Volunteers at the Mendicity Building and at Euston Station, or Kingsbridge as I used to call it when I was a child, in Dublin in 1916. When they got to France towards the end of the Somme campaign, they were with this naval division, but their nemesis really came on the 13th of November 1916. And one of the tragedies about it, they took the village, this little village called Hamel. It was the objective that he had on the day, and it was the objective the 1st Battalion had back on the 1st of July, 4 or 5 months previous. The Somme had achieved nothing, only utter tragedy. And military historians will argue, one of the biggest sort of, I suppose, benefits of the Somme was it jumped the learning curve, if you like, because everything after the Somme, tactical ideas, and use of artillery, combination of using artillery with aircraft, this thing called the creeping barrage, using small platoons instead of waves of infantry going over the top. All that had changed and had been learned by the Somme, but the argument is, what was the cost? 20,000 men killed in one day, 40,000, nice round figures, but these are all human beings, and was it worth it?